Welcome to another edition of the All Cardinals Draft Podcast. My name is Don Andrew and joined by my co-host Andrew Harbaugh. Andrew, everybody's going crazy in Mobile down for the Senior Bowl. Neither you or I were able to make it, even though I feel like we're somewhat regulars whenever it comes to frequenting the wonderful barbecue of the Southern hospitality that is Mobile. But still, nonetheless, we've been keeping tabs on the Senior Bowl, and you actually put out two different pieces, 5 offensive players to watch and 5 defensive players to watch. And Andrew, I don't want to brag, but I think you might know a little bit about football.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit beforehand. You go down your regulars down at Mobile, you know the setup, and you know what types of players can kind of emerge from it, and this and that, and play types, styles. And when you look at that roster, it's a Senior Bowl roster that doesn't have a lot of heavy hitters. A lot of really the top talent dropped out this year. Tyree Wilson probably being the biggest name. Some other ones that we'll talk about later that are in what we're going to do today. But that being said, Jim Nagy, the director of it, does a fantastic job of just getting talent top to bottom. It's not going to have the flashiest names, but you're going to have good football players there. And I think especially the new kind of arms race that's starting between the Shrine Game and the Senior Bowl, trying to see who can keep the NFL's eye on them. Competition makes everybody better. And I think the Senior Bowl really showed that this year with the roster and the way everything's been going down there. Just top to bottom, it's a good roster. And I was able to pick out a couple people here and there.
Yeah, most definitely. Like you already alluded to, a couple of those guys did make it into what we are doing today, which is a 4-round mock draft that my man Andrew did on Pro Football Focus. And to be honest, Andrew, whenever you first sent it to me, I'm watching the Suns game last night, and I just quickly glanced at it, and I'm like, I don't know about this. But then I took the time, I went over it, and of course, very unsurprisingly, by the end, I'm like, okay, you know what? If I'm an Arizona Cardinals fan, I will take this. But Andrew, we'll start off like this. The Cardinals did not pick at pick number 1, at pick number 2, or pick number 3. And it feels like there's this mock draft might be one of maybe 10 in the entire world that does not have the Arizona Cardinals taking either Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. And if you give me just 1 second, I'll love to work with technology and pull this up for everybody. So Anderson in this mock goes at number 1. Will Levis goes at number 2, and then you have a situation to where Bryce Young is sitting there at 3. Right. I'll let you take the floor from here, because before you even selected somebody, like it went completely a different direction than where you see most mock drafts going for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, and this is where we talked about in our last show, which you can also find on the All Cardinals YouTube channel feed. I talked about how there might be 5 different scenarios of chaos. It's funny how a lot of these mock draft simulators are honestly not the best when it comes to kind of figuring out who goes where. Case in point, don't look after pick 9, where the Cardinals are, and we'll have a great time here, everybody. But the point is, I could see Chicago going with Anderson or Carter, and I could see Houston going with Will Levis. I've been on that boat the whole time. I had a mock draft come out last month. I think, I'm not trying to brag here, I'm one of the first people, I think, that really threw Levis to Houston, especially when he was first, when they had the first overall pick at the time. But this is a scenario where if you're number 3 in Arizona, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are available. Pick number 4 is the Colts. I don't think the Colts are going to take Anthony Richardson over Stroud necessarily. But the point is, number 4 is the Colts. They're going to go quarterback. So someone's going to want to jump to 3, because that's the last chance you're going to have at one of these top end, probably plug and play starting quarterbacks that are available. So that's why as soon as I saw that happen, I was like, I don't even need to look at who's available. I just want to trade out of this. And if I'm Arizona and you only have 5 picks in this draft right now, I think if you're Rosen for it, you need to trade out as well. I think he knows that from being at Tennessee. They're not afraid. They were never afraid to trade out under Robinson. Obviously, Belichick in New England are famous for trading back and drafting 3 all-pro players that nobody's heard of in college and just winning Super Bowls. Arizona obviously wants to do that, and it's easier said than done, but it's easier to win the Powerball when you have more numbers and tickets bought. So this is kind of what we did. And I think where we fell down at 9, obviously there's a talent drop off from Jalen Carter, who probably would have been the pick if we had stayed, but I don't think it's as glaring as it could be. So as we get further into this mock, I think Cardinals fans would be very happy if this were how it went down.
Absolutely. And I think I probably encapsulate a lot of the feelings for Cardinals fans, because I saw the first round mock draft and I'm like, that's not Jalen Carter. That's not Will Anderson. What are we doing here? But, you know, of course, you go through the process, and trading down from pick number 3 to pick number 9 is obviously something that can be very, very beneficial. So before we get into the first pick, here's the trade that was done. So the Carolina Panthers moved from pick number 9 to pick number 3, 6 different spots that they jumped. The Cardinals in turn received the 9th overall pick, taking Carolina's spot, a second-round pick in this draft, a third-round pick in this draft, and then a future second-round pick. We talked a little bit about it before the show, but I think you could do a lot worse whenever it comes to hauls like this. But granted, you are dropping down 6 spots in the top 10, like you already alluded to. There is a little bit of a talent and drop-off whenever it comes to a guy like Jalen Carter, and then the player that's going to be named here in a second.
Yeah, and I think, too, like, this might even be too light for compensation, but it was enough that I felt comfortable as a starting point. Like, I don't think they'd probably get any more in 2023, but maybe you get like a 2024 fourth thrown in there, or a fifth, just something a little extra to kind of sweeten the deal, because you are moving back 6 spots. You're almost out of the top 10, but you stay within it. So I think that's where this kind of comes off as, I think, a pretty fair compensation across the board.
No, absolutely. I think teams picking in that top 3, that top 5 range, knowing quarterback needy teams like the Carolina Panthers, you know, I have Frank Reich at the head coach, and we've seen what Reich can do with a sensible quarterback at the helm who's actually healthy. You know, and I think there's really no value on that. So, you know, touching on your point, yeah, maybe another early day 3 pick might sweeten this deal up just a little bit more for the Cardinals, but nonetheless, a very impressive haul. And who they take there at pick number 9, like we said, isn't Jalen Carter, is not Will Anderson, obviously isn't a quarterback. Clemson defensive lineman Bryan Bresee. Now, admittedly so, Andrew, I right now do not know a lot about him. You obviously do enough to take him. Sell me on why Bresee is the guy at number
9. He's kind of where, you know, how we talked about last week with Will Anderson and Jalen Carter, how one fits a need and one's kind of a BPA. I think this is kind of your Walmart great value version of both combined. What I mean in that is that Bresee can penetrate in the middle of the line. He's listed as a defensive lineman. He plays a lot of interior line, but he can also be put on the edge if he needs to. So depending on whoever the defensive coordinator is, because who knows what the Vance Joseph situation is going to end up being like based on the head coaching hire. If it is Joseph and he sticks around, which I personally am a fan of at this point, which I don't know if that's going to be seen favorably or not, but
Pitchfork's already out.
Yeah. Anyway, but regardless, whoever is going to be there should be able to scheme with him enough to kind of just play to his strengths, and that's what a coach should do to begin with. Should being the key word. But if they get Bresee here at 9. It's not a fancy name. It's not going to be a name that pops off. It's not going to be a name that's going to have fans probably waiting at the airport for when his plane lands. But it's going to be somebody that by the middle of the season, end of his rookie year, you get excited to kind of see take the next step in year 2. So that's what you're kind of looking for. It's unfortunately, it's not the win now game if you're a Cardinals fan. It's the long game. It's kind of they're in the, like we said last week too. I'm going to keep plugging that. You really need to go watch that show if you haven't, so you get all this. But they remind me a lot of the Lions right now, where I think if they nail the head coaching hire, I think there's enough of a base there. The front office is sound now. I think Bill Will's kind of come to terms like, okay, we tried it this way. It's not working. I think Bresee would be one of those ones where kind of like how Hutchinson was this year, where he just came in, made plays. Bresee could be the same thing. So I think that's where this pick is a long-term great choice. It may not have the most fun upside for week 1 where you can't wait to see him play, but at the same time, he's going to be giving you production and getting you results, which is what you want at the end of the day.
Now, you brought up the term versatile just in terms of what he might be able to do, kind of being that middle ground between a guy like Carter and a guy like Anderson. I think a lot of Cardinals fans just got terrible flashbacks because you've seen versatile guys like out of them, Hassan Reddick. You've seen versatile guys like out of the Isaiah Simmons come through, and both of them haven't exactly been able to hit their ceiling in Arizona. And so that's kind of like a very big fear of Cardinals fans. But also to your point, new coaching staff, new culture, new way of doing things. You would hope that whoever is the next head coach of the Cardinals is able to utilize a guy like this properly. So I guess my next question is, where do you see him fitting in with the defense?
I think his best fits interior, but he's one of those ones where, depending on how they want to approach the defensive end and how they go with Zach Allen and replacing J.J. Watt, you see a lot of teams do rotations, and that's kind of the way it's been most effective, unless you have a dominant guy. You want to keep him in the game, obviously. But rotations keep everybody fresh, keeps offensive lines on their toes. And I think if you need Brees to be a part of that, he could. But if you also just want to plant him inside and let him just kind of control running lanes and also get some penetration up the middle, he could do that too. So that's where I'm talking of versatility. It's not so much like Isaiah Simmons came into the league, and a lot of people saw him as the best defensive player in that draft. And he still could be. But he's just been played everywhere. And I can't remember. I saw it broken down. The Cardinals Twitter account shared it. It was like he had so many slots at corner, so many slots at reps at safety, so many reps at linebacker. Like, you got to put him somewhere so he can learn. And you saw that struggle. You could tell he was struggling when you watch Hard Knocks towards the end of the season. And it was almost like he was just kind of fighting himself more on plays. And they talk about how he's overanalyzing everything and slowing down. Well, of course he's going to overanalyze everything. You got him doing 5 different positions.
Dude, and that's people's biggest gripe with Vance Joseph, and why a lot of people might not be keen on him sticking around here in Arizona, is that the way they've deployed Isaiah Simmons. And dude, I get the allure of it, dude. Whenever he came out, I got a lot of like Shaq Thompson vibes. Like, is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? Oh, he can play both. But it's kind of like the old adage: if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. If Isaiah Simmons is a safety and a linebacker, he needs to kind of stay in one lane. And so you kind of seen the toying with him. I think before last year, he played most of his spots at inside linebacker, but then this year he was primarily used as a nickel corner. Now, whether that was due to injury, whether that was on purpose, is kind of whatever. And to your point, they gave him the green dot to start out the season. They gave him the green dot, which is something he's never done before in a regular season game. And they asked him to play out of position. They asked him to cover Travis Kelce. Now, Andrew, I'm not an NFL head coach. I know a little bit about football, but only a particle of sand compared to those guys in the National Football League. That really didn't add up to me by week 1. And then you saw what happened. And then they benched him. They tried to give him time to recalibrate and figure things out. And what you know, as soon as he got regular snaps at one position, he started playing a little bit better.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, where I don't know. This year as a whole, like, if you're a Cardinals fan, a Cardinals analyst, like, it's kind of why I enjoyed that I got picked up here, was unintentionally it turned into the greatest thing ever for an analyst, because there's so many talking points. But if you're a fan watching this team, and if you're a player on this team especially, I mean, we've gone through it. There's 12 different things between injuries, off the field, turnover now, the Steve Keim thing. Like, this was not a regular NFL season by any stretch. And I'm saying that as a Browns fan. So, like, for me to think that this was just out of this world says a lot, I think. So I think Osenfort's going to be the start of a breath of fresh air for this franchise. I think whoever the head coach is going to be will be the same thing. If it's Flores, I think that would be the most beneficial hire for both Bresee and Simmons, since we're on the topic, because he was able to have a good defense in Miami. But I just think they need to quit. And I think part of this was Kingsbury too, is they need to quit trying to be too creative and kind of just stick to a little bit of old school football. And I say that, and I say that as a 28-year-old feeling like a 58-year-old as I say that. But just keep it simple at this point. Detroit has done that. Again, the Detroit model, I think, is really the best example for what the Cardinals could be. They don't ask Jared Goff to do too much. I think they need to simplify things for Kyler. I think the defense does just enough to kind of make plays when they need to, but look at what they're getting out of their groups. Like, you look at their linebacker group, Isaiah Simmons has more talent than that entire linebacker group on paper. But that linebacking group, probably one of the best in the league now.
Yeah.
And that speaks to who they have at defensive coordinator with Aaron Glenn and why he's getting so many head coaching interviews. But good coaching can fix all that. Detroit should not be where they're at in their rebuild, but they are because of coaching and a front office. And I think with Bresee, I think with Simmons and so many others, I think their potential is still there. Like, and Simmons is younger too. So I know seeing another versatile Clemson player get drafted is probably not what you want to see, but getting a lot of Washington defensive backs worked out pretty well with Budda Baker and Byron Murphy. So maybe you do the front seven full of Clemson players and everything evens itself out.
And you know what? That actually just might work down the line. You never really know. Moving on, though. So we got, is it Bresee or Brees? I'm not very well attuned.
You know, I think tomato at this point, but I will look that up more and we'll get back to you.
Sounds good. I will try my best to drop that in the comments whenever we get official confirmation on how you say this fine young man's last name. Second round, though, with the Cardinals-Panthers trade, the Cardinals were able to get another second-round pick in this draft, which gave them 2 in the second round. And Andrew, you went right to the trenches, my guy, which I think is a phenomenal move. And you got 2 bona fide studs here in the second round for the Cardinals to add to the roster.
Yeah, and again, I mentioned earlier, being a Browns fan, that's kind of the approach they took before they got their quarterback at the time, Baker, and now Watson, was they built up that defensive line, they built up that offensive line. And when you have good trench players, one on offense, you can establish the run a little bit better. Look at what Nick Chubb's been able to do for that offense. He's the straw that stirs the drink. Same with Detroit, with Penei Sewell being their top pick 2 years ago and building their lineup that way. Jamal Williams has a career year for touchdowns. Same thing you can get out of James Conner and potentially another running back. There's a tease for later, but no, I think I was telling you beforehand, Ika is one of my favorite players, both off the field and on the field, where started at LSU. I told you he was got a little bit famous for some clips doing the haka before games, which if you don't know what the haka is, look up the New Zealand rugby team that literally they make everybody piss their pants.
Before they play.
Before the game, and it's over. And Ika, as you can see in this picture, is a very intimidating force. And you got Leke Fotu in the middle. I think Ika could play next to him, maybe even replace him, who knows. But I like Ika a lot. He also can get inside and penetrate, has a really high motor for his size. And somebody else, too, that would for size, Cody Mauch for offensive tackle out of North Dakota State. He's now the Senior Bowl this week, having a hell of a time. There was a clip I saw yesterday with a lot of people have Andre Carter from Army mocked in the first round, and Cody just put him down time and again. And he's able to get leverage, make him lose balance, fall over, and he finishes blocks too. Like, he doesn't just knock somebody down and think, okay, well, the play's over. No, he is missing 2 of his front teeth for a reason. He's a hockey player in a football uniform. And I think that's something that this team desperately needs is they need an edge, not the position player, but like they need to play with an edge on both.
They need a dude.
Yes. And I think he could be that, where he could be an anchor on the left side or the right side. No matter what, he could help Kyler. And that's what you're trying to do is give Kyler more time in the pocket, get James Conner to get some more, earn his contract extension. And then if you're on defense, let Ika stop what everyone has been able to do. I feel like is just run against the Cardinals, and you need to get somebody who's a space eater but can also get to the quarterback. That's what you get there.
Look, Ben, you can sign me up for help in the trenches all day long. A lot of times these aren't necessarily like sexy picks, but at the end of the day, they are going to make your football team better. And I mean, if you build through the trenches, I just feel like that makes everybody else's job so much easier. So, big fan going again on the defensive line. I mean, the Cardinals struggled to both rush the passer and stop the run in 2022. So both are very big needs. Potentially losing Zach Allen on top of J.J. Watt is just it could prove not like pivotal, but that's a lot of sack production to make up, and that's a lot of names to make up along the defensive line. So, what big fan of that with the Ika, right?
Yeah, Siaki Ika. That's how I say it. I'm pretty sure that's what I've heard it said.
And then Cody Malk on the other side of the offensive line. I mean, you're potentially losing guys like Calvin Beachum, Rodney Hudson, Justin Pugh. I think Will Hernandez is another free agent along the line as well. So a lot of room for turnover on both sides of the ball. But if you're able to get two guys like this, absolutely exciting. Before we move on to the third round of this 4-round mock draft here on the All Cardinals YouTube channel, comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. You pulled the trigger on a trade to get more draft capital, and it just so happens that trade involved Arizona Cardinals receiver DeAndre Hopkins. Let me ask you this. Was this something you sought out in this mock draft, or was this just something that popped up?
This is something I sought out, and I think it's one of those things where, again, I talked earlier with trading back. Hopkins has a really big price tag, and when you have as many free agents as the Cardinals do, you want to try to have as much money as you can. And I love Hopkins. Hopkins, when healthy, top 5 receiver, talent-wise, in the NFL. The reason I sought out New England is Belichick has shown he's not afraid to make a splash going for big receivers. Whether trading them or acquiring them. Deion Branch, Randy Moss, my examples. But you have Bill O'Brien there in New England now. Mac Jones is going to be looking for help. DeAndre Hopkins and Bill Belichick could not stop gushing over each other on Hard Knocks. And it's deserved on both sides. I'm not giving either one of them a hard time for it. But there's a relationship there. And obviously, Osafort, with his New England ties, has a relationship with the New England front office. The only thing, like I said, is I think Cardinals fans may not be happy with the compensation, but a high-priced wide receiver doesn't really get that much in return. I mean, even look at what Antonio Brown got from Las Vegas, Oakland at the time, and I think this is better than what the Raiders got for, or the Steelers got for Antonio Brown, who was playing at a way better and way higher level before all the off the field stuff that Hopkins is playing at right now. So I think getting an extra 3 and 2 extra 4s, I would be packing DeAndre's house up for him at that point. No offense.
For sure. A lot of people like to bring up the Devontae Adams and the Tyreek Hill trades whenever trying to assess what's fair value for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. And do not get me wrong, I think DeAndre Hopkins is by far one of the best receivers of his generation, if not one of the top. I mean, you can make a strong argument for him and a few other people during their heyday. But two big things are key here: age and contract. Hopkins is 30 plus years old, and he's making, I think he had, or is projected to be, the second highest cap hit at the wide receiver position, just under Tyreek Hill heading to 2023. And reportedly he wants a new contract. I don't know what that's going to look like, but case in point, teams are going to have a hard time justifying that price tag, right? At least most teams. You pointed out all the ties to New England. You pointed out everything else that could potentially lead him there. Let's not forget that DeAndre Hopkins also has a no-trade contract in his a no-trade clause, in his contract, which kind of gives him control on where he wants to go to. New England may very well be on that list. But regardless, in this mock draft, DeAndre Hopkins goes to New England, comes back for a third-round pick. So now you have 2 in the third round, one from the Patriots, one from the Cardinals, and then I think 2 others. One of them was a comp pick, and then one of them was from the Panthers, which we'll get into all that in a second. And then 2 fourth-round picks in this draft, fairly close to each other as well. So, dude, just from the fourth round alone, you're looking at a plethora of picks to work with, which is very, very good for where the Cardinals were at in their rebuilding process. So without further ado, the third round picks, Andrew had, again, 3 out of 4 of these guys are playing along the line of scrimmage. One of them is capable of filling in very, very nicely next to Marquise Brown and hopefully Rondell Moore heading into the future. So, floor is yours.
Yeah, no, Parker Washington. I also cover Penn State for USA Today, so that's where I'm really familiar with Parker Washington. I was so annoyed with how Penn State used him this year. But at the same time, they also kind of got him opportunities to do different gadget plays, which showcased his skill set. He's not the biggest receiver. In fact, he's honestly pretty small. Like, I've been next to him, and if he measures in at 5'10 or 5'9, I would not be surprised. But he's also going to come in probably at 200 pounds because I've affectionately been calling him the muscle hamster after the Doug Martin comparison way back when for all of the youngins that are watching this potentially. So
we're old, man. Jeez.
I know. But the Parker Washington pick, he plays very similar to DeAndre, where he plays much bigger than he is. DeAndre just is big. But Parker, you could put outside, you could put inside at slot, you could put him in gadget plays, whatever you want to do with him, you'll be able to do, and he'll have success. If you want to watch what he could do, his biggest game of the year this past year was against Ohio State, who arguably was probably the second toughest defense that Penn State played against. And he had Sean Clifford throwing him the ball for his entire career. And if you don't know who Sean Clifford is, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Pivoting over to the Ohio State side of things, ironically, worked out well. Somebody who is down in Mobile, who did measure in at, I think his arms from fingertip to fingertip, I think it was like 89.5 inches. And they said that's the equivalent of being 7'5". Like, that's the arms you would have. Obviously you want big tackles if you can get them. Another throwback player that DeJuan Jones reminds me of is Phil Lodeholt played at Oklahoma, was on their national championship team. Well, runner-up when Sam Bradford won his Heisman. Went on to he was like a day 2 pick, I want to say, for the Vikings. Had a very good career with the Vikings, made Pro Bowls. Didn't move the best, so people had concerns. People overlooked him. I think DeJuan Jones could be the same thing. Whether or not Kyler's going to be able to see over him is a different discussion, but I think we'll be fine there. And I mean that not as a joke, but that is a literal concern that could potentially arise with having that big of a tackle with the size of quarterback you have. Third pick here, third one in the third round, Steve Avila. Again, you said not the sexiest picks here, but Avila could be a plug-and-play guard for the Cardinals. You talked about having Will Anderson being a free agent along with others. I think Avila could be a very fun, reliable starter for them. Somebody that could play opposite DeJuan Jones or Cody Mouch, who we just drafted in the second round earlier. And if you think about that there, we've got 3 new starters now on the line just from trading back from 3 to 9, and then now also trading DeAndre Hopkins. So you get 3 potential starters from trading 1 starter and moving back a little bit in the draft. And then also another pick we got, I believe this is the New England one, 96 overall here in the third round, Byron Young. I talked earlier how I think we weren't on yet when I was talking about this, how this team doesn't necessarily can afford projects being their first round picks, but they can afford projects later. That is exactly what Byron Young is. He did not start playing football till his senior year of high school, went and played community college first couple years, didn't have any offers, got to Tennessee, earned a spot, and started dominating in the SEC. So somebody that's learned the game very quickly after starting very late. And from there, he's kind of just really taken it step by step by step. And I think Byron Young would be a fantastic edge guy you can be patient with, much like Zach Allen was when he came out of Boston College. He had the production that Byron Young doesn't have, but Byron Young has way more tools, I think, coming out of college than Zach Allen did, and we saw what he was able to turn into. At 96 overall, I'm willing to take a chance on him. So that's where my mindset was with it.
Yeah, let's not forget the Cardinals, after trading for Marquise Brown last draft, used their first pick of the draft, which is the second round, on the project and Trey McBride at tight end. So I don't think this Cardinals team or the fan base are exactly surprised or shocked by projects But dude, I feel like especially at like positions at like edge and like defensive line and especially offensive line, you can never have enough bodies. And I think Cardinals fans know that from last year when you saw the injuries pile up on the offensive line and you had rookies starting, you had undrafted guys starting. I mean, the amount of different offensive line combinations, which basically the only guy who like regularly started was Kelvin Beachum. And he played the most offensive snaps of anybody last year. Anybody along the offense, he played the most amount of snaps. Aside from him at right tackle, it was a crapshoot week to week on what you were getting. And obviously, you want stability, you want talent, you want health. And I think this draft so far has afforded the Cardinals all of that. Just a fresh opportunity to get these guys in and hopefully rebuild the offensive line. Excuse me, words are hard. And ultimately keep Kyler Murray upright and healthy. So moving on to the last round of this 4-round mock draft done by Andrew. Didn't Roschon break his hand or something like that at the Senior Bowl yesterday?
I believe they said he survived the injury scare. So whether or not anything's been official done with it, I believe he was back at practice. Don't quote me on that.
No, he definitely returned. But I thought I saw that he broke his hand. And then he still like managed to practice.
Yeah, well,
I might be completely.
That's all I need to hear to want to draft him.
Well, I mean, dude, you talk about a guy who just like wants to play no matter what, especially at like a position that. Gotcha.
He didn't. They just threw a cast on it.
Dude, dog. That's exactly what you need.
Won't play the game, but he's practicing.
Dude, that's what you need for the Arizona Cardinals. You need a couple of dogs, and I feel like Roschon Johnson kicks off a very, very good 4th round.
Yeah, no, and Johnson's a name too that's not going to be known to everyone who watches college football, because when you see a Texas running back, you're like, well, this isn't Bijan Robinson. And yeah, you're right, it's not Bijan Robinson. Roschon Johnson played the complementary role, but he played it very, very well. So it's something where he could do that with James Conner. James Conner, I'm not a fan of paying running backs. I love James Conner personally. He's actually from not far away from here where I live. So he's very much always a success story name that people are talking about. But at the end of the day, it is a business, obviously, and he's set to make a decent amount of money going forward. And if you draft a running back in round 4 and you see enough out of him as a rookie, which I think you could with Johnson in limited roles, you can kind of pivot from there. Even if he sticks around and you kind of get a whole Zeke, Tony Pollard thing going on, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I think Dallas, that's one of the better aspects of their offense is how they've really taken the ball out of Zeke's hand, except for when he really needs to be the guy. And Tony Pollard's emerged. I think same thing could happen here with James Conner and Roschon Johnson.
Well, I think that's a big part too, because they've done that in part of trying to keep Zeke healthy, and that's been kind of a knock on James Conner for a lot of his career. Is he looks very, very strong and talented whenever he's actually on the field, but he hasn't exactly been able to play a full season without being hurt, and that's something that has kind of plagued him dating back to his days with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But the Cardinals fans, whenever Conner has been on the field, he's proven to be very, very valuable. So nothing wrong with keeping a running back stable, fresh.
Yeah, and when you have 3 4th-round picks and you have all those previous 3rd-round picks, you're able to be a little bit more reachy with picks, I would say, or just afford to kind of not go a need necessarily, but kind of go BPA. I think if Roschon's here this late in the 4th round, he might not be after the Senior Bowl. We don't know yet, but I think he'd be a BPA type of pick, and it's one that I would sign off on 100%.
Absolutely. I'm going to let you handle this next name because I butchered a very, very simple name earlier in the podcast, so the floor is yours.
Oluwatimi is the starting center for Michigan. Again, not going to be the fanciest pick, but you mentioned it earlier, and I was actually very happy you threw that in there, was you don't know what the future is going to be with Rodney Hudson. And like you talked about the injuries on the offensive line, you can never have enough guys. Even if they bring Hudson back on a 1-year deal, give me Oluwatimi at this point in the 4th round. Again, just whether he be a depth piece on the offensive line or he's somebody you throw in right away and start, he was able to control the trenches for Michigan, really was the catalyst on that offensive line that was able to be one of the better rushing attacks in college football with Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum. And I want to have something from that line, and at this point, it's going to be him. So that's where I took the pick here. Again, these are not going to be the sexiest picks, but there's somebody that you could have a very nice, long, happy marriage with and have good conversations and nice walks on the beach. And if you don't like how it looks, just do it after the sun goes down and you'll still be happy.
For sure. Finishing up the 4-round mock draft, Owen Papo?
Owen P. I gave you a lot of good names here to start this off.
You certainly did. And whenever I was making these
Papo is how I've been saying it.
Okay. I was making these graphics and I'm like, man, like this dude really went out of his way to make podcasting as hard as possible tomorrow. But the last we've landed, off-ball linebacker?
Yes, off-ball linebacker, played in the middle of the Auburn defense. I mentioned Sean Clifford earlier in Penn State. Second game of the year. Might have been the third. I'm really bad Penn State analyst. Very early in the season. Penn State went down to Auburn, and Auburn was ranked. Penn State was not. Crowd was going crazy. And first drive, Papo just decleats Sean Clifford and really set the tone for that game until Penn State kind of ran away with it. But they kept it close because of that defense and the way he was able to kind of command things. He may not be able to be a plug-and-play starter, but he's somebody who could bring an edge, and that's what we talked about here this whole time is you want players that have a little bit of an edginess to them, and I think he fits that bill 100%. He decleated Clifford, but it was a clean decleating. So he also is able to play controlled and not kind of get penalized for it at the same time, but also be able to send a message. That's something that this defense needs. And whether it be like him and Budda Baker, I think would be best friends. They kind of play very similar where it's 100% all the time, no plays off. He has great range, great pursuit. If he gets beat on a play, he does not give up. He will finish it all the way down till the whistle blows. And I think that's something that Arizona needs is more examples like Budda brings on defense. I think Owen Papo would be another example of that. May not be the same talent-wise, but it's easier to coach somebody that gives you the effort versus who has the talent and doesn't.
I think if there's one way to earn your way into a Cardinals fan heart, it's to play like Budda Baker. Obviously, the talent level, there might be a discrepancy there, but if you're giving effort and you're just going balls to the wall 100% every single play, I think not just in Arizona, but everywhere, you are going to get respect. You are going to at least earn yourself the opportunity to get more playing time. And I think for a 4th-round pick, that's probably the most ideal situation there. Putting a bow on this mock draft, we had a total of, I'm counting 10 picks, right? 10 picks in 4 rounds, which is absolutely wild. We haven't even gotten to rounds 5, 6, and 7, which will have to go at a later date. But I mean, dude, you talk about changing the culture. You talk about turning the ship around in Arizona. A top 10 pick, a guy who can wreak havoc on the defensive line, another defensive tackle, and the 2nd round picked with an offensive tackle, really going through the trenches. There's a couple more guys littered throughout the offensive line there. Got another edge prospect. You got an off-ball linebacker. Even got yourself a little bit of receiver help. No corner, though. And this is something I brought up to you a little bit before we started recording. No corner, which I thought was a little bit interesting. So we're working under the assumption that Byron Murphy heads back to Arizona, right? And then obviously They have Marco Wilson. They have a couple of other guys they can re-sign there. I think if you're able to attack the line of scrimmage, get pressure on the quarterback with your front 7, that'll help alleviate a lot of the pressure you saw with the Cardinals secondary last year in 2022.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about that again, not to keep plugging last week's episode, but we talked about how if you're able to get pressure up front, it's going to make the quarterback's jobs easier. It means less time they have to cover and less time for them to be exposed by receivers extending plays, quarterbacks extending plays. I think that would be a big factor here in my hesitation to go with corner. I'll also add this corner class is just uber deep. Like it has a lot of big names at the top. Like you'll see Joey Porter mocked a lot to Arizona. I've seen that put in a couple times. not necessarily a 3, but kind of like when they were in the middle of the draft. And that's the thing. A lot of the top end talent at corner is not going to make sense if they stay at 3. At 9, it could make sense. I think instead of Bresee, maybe you go corner there, get somebody like a Devon Weatherspoon or a Joey Porter Jr. But I took the whole, like we talked about, trenches approach. But there's so many other corners, especially down in Mobile right now, that you can see having good weeks with Julius Brents from Kansas State. Deontay Banks, who's not in Mobile, but he's a name that's rising. Tyreek Stevenson, Rajon Wright, who's Last Chance U, Kai Blue Kelly. I mean, there's a ton of corners there's so many of them that I think teams are really going to tick on them at the end of day 2, early day 3. I think that's something Arizona could take advantage of. If it's first pick in the 5th round, it's going to be one of the top picks, obviously. Take a corner there, you might even get a starter. And to go with that, say you get 7 starters then out of your top 5 rounds necessarily if you're Arizona, I think you'd be more than happy with that.
Yeah, a total of 10 picks, and PFF gave you a nice little A- grade for the draft there in the bottom right corner. So well done, my guy. Obviously, like, teams are not going to hit on every single pick. You're going to have flops. You're going to have guys that just don't work out, but I think you put it best. The more numbers you give yourself to play the lottery, the better of a chance you have to win the Powerball. And I think you think that way. I think a lot of NFL GMs tend to think that way too. So not a bad mock draft at all. I mean, I feel like not a lot of sexy picks, but whenever the trenches get built, a lot of great things happen for football teams. And then you're just able to add talent from there and kind of build yourself into the Cardinals football team everybody thought you were supposed to be.
Yeah, next time I'll be sure to trade Kyler and we could draft a quarterback, and we'll just go all out and just lose our minds with it. But no, I get what you're saying. And that's the thing. It's not going to be rebuilds aren't supposed to be fun. Like, you don't want to be in this position if you're the Arizona Cardinals. But building from the trenches out, I really do believe is the best way. It's the way teams like Arizona has done well. We just talked about it with Detroit. Tennessee, another place Ozenfort was just at, what they do with Derrick Henry, like, you build from the trenches out. Now, this year wasn't the best example of that, but in the past, they were winning the AFC South no problem. So, again, Seattle in division, that's another good example, I think, that's built from the trenches out and kind of really done well there. So there's more examples of taking that approach and finding success than there are other ways in the NFL. So, and if you look at the Super Bowl teams this year, obviously, like the Chiefs, Pat Mahomes is going to be the star there, but that offensive line got completely retooled through free agency in the draft 2 years ago. They replaced all 5 starters, and now look at what they're able to do. Same with the opposite side there with Philadelphia. They have Jason Kelsey. They got Landon Dickerson. On the defensive side, they've got Brandon Graham. They have Jordan Davis. They bring back Ndamukong Suh.
They bullied, regardless of the injuries at quarterback. They bullied a very, very good San Francisco 49ers team who prided themselves on dominating the trenches. And Philly took that game to them. And that wasn't the first time Philly had done that in a season. It wasn't the 2nd, 5th, or 8th time they've done that. The quarterbacks are going to get a lot of the praise, like you said. But, dude, those guys up front, both on the offensive and the defensive side of the ball, big reason why they're there.
And if you want to look at what happens when you don't have depth at the offensive line position, look what happened to Cincinnati. Like, they were able to hold their own against Buffalo, and that was, I think, all the magic they had left on that offensive line with all the injuries they had was used in Buffalo in the snow, and they just couldn't do it against Kansas City. And I think Kansas City also obviously had a lot more Burrowhead comments in their head and so on and so forth. But my point is, the teams in the Super Bowl built from the trenches out, and Cincinnati refuses to give Burrow much more offensive line help through the draft. And they went to the Super Bowl last year. That was great. But this year, I think they could have been there if they would have made it more of a priority with depth. And that's why this mock did that.
Absolutely. I could not have said it better myself. Andrew, thank you so much for supplying this at very, very minimum, talking point for people here on the All Cardinals YouTube page. I thought it was very great. If you thought it was great, if you thought it was trash, if you think I should take off my Barcelona jersey and never wear this ugly gold piece of garbage again, just kidding. Let us know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals Draft Podcast. My name is Donald Drew, and for Andrew Harbaugh, we will see you next time. Thank you so much for supporting us.